This major shift in style from the complex narratives that we saw in Noah and the Great Flood, beginning with the creation of the heavens and the earth series. Michelangelo is much more able to convey a sense of emotionality that can be easily seen from the floor of the chapel. Here is a simple monumental figure of God separating the light from the dark. Here we see the imposing figure of God as he is in the process of the creation of the sun, the moon, and the plants. And finally, God dividing water from the heavens. It is Michelangelo's realization of how to use the monumental figures and mastery of rendering his figures in dramatic gesticulation that helped to tell the rest of the story of Genesis without the addition of extraneous details. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." Genesis 1:26. Here God is depicted as an elderly, white-bearded Caucasian man, wrapped in a swirling cloak, while Adam on the lower left is completely naked. God's right arm is outstretched to impart the spark of light from his own finger into that of Adam, whose left arm is extended in a pose mirroring God's, a reminder that man is created in the image and likeness of God. Also, many experts believe that the female figure under God's left arm is in fact Eve, in a foreshadowing of the next two panels. Another point is that Adam's finger and God's finger aren't touching. It gives the impression that God, the giver of life, is reaching out to Adam, who has yet to receive it. They, God and Adam, are not on the same level, as would be two humans shaking hands, for instance. The second chapter of Genesis explains how Eve was created by God from the rib of Adam in order to give the latter some company. They would both be later expelled from the Garden of Eden for ignoring God's wishes in a key scene for religious followers. He demonstrates his mastery of the human figure for Adam and Eve by contrasting the smooth young bodies of Adam and Eve at the point of Eve's temptation to their older and unattractive bodies when they are banished from Eden. We see the shift to a new monumentality of style depicted in other areas of his gigantic masterpiece. For example, in the figures of the Sibyls and prophets and the spandrels surrounding the vault. Many historians believe that Michelangelo used male models to create his muscular-looking women, and this might in fact be true. There is still much argument. Personally, I think that Michelangelo was trying to illustrate figures that could be read from the floor of the chapel more easily, and there is also great variety in his female figures, although the Sibyls look pretty muscular for their time. The Libyan Sibyl is also outstanding and unique, although she is in a contorted position that would be nearly impossible for an actual person to hold and lift that enormous book around. Michelangelo nonetheless executes her with a sprezzatura, a deceptive ease. Also, here's an example of one of Michelangelo's preparatory sketches for the fresco of the Libyan Sibyl. This is the same kind of sketch that would have gone into every one of the figures and other details in the ceiling frescoes. Now we are looking at one of the pedimental frescoes in one of the ceiling corners of the Sistine Chapel, where we find one of my favorite Old Testament episodes of Judith, who saved her city from Bethulia, from the siege of Holofernes, general of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, by killing him after a banquet at which he had been made drunk, beheading him and bringing his head to his fellow citizens. Judith, chapters 10 through 13. The episode is illustrated in three scenes. On the left are the sleeping guards. In the center, Judith and her handmaid are covering the head of the murdered Holofernes with a cloth. The head's presumed to be a portrait of Michelangelo. I think it's clear to see. On the right, we see the body of the mutilated Holofernes. Yes, he is missing something there. In the corner pediment opposite Judith beheading Holofernes, Michelangelo allows us to look into the camp of the Philistines, symbolized by a single tent partially seen and two dim heads at either corner. This is, of course, the famous scene of David slaying the giant Goliath. The terrified giant awaiting decapitation and the heroic youth crowd into the foreground of the composition, the famous sling that David used to fell Goliath just beneath the giant's head.
The triangular shapes that create the spandrels in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are part of the actual architectural moldings of the original ceiling. They are physically present and real. All the other architectural details in the frescoed mural are masterful painted illusions by Michelangelo, from the architectural moldings to the nymphs posing as columns and the pilasters supporting the seats for the figures above them. Michelangelo completed the Sistine Chapel in 1512. Its importance in the history of art cannot be overstated. It turned into a veritable academy for young painters, a position that was cemented when Michelangelo returned to the chapel 20 years later to execute the Last Judgment fresco on the altar wall. Let me show you a picture of that. There was much controversy surrounding the Last Judgment, but that's a story for another day. Although there's one little detail I would like to show you. Most experts agree that Michelangelo depicted his own face in the flayed skin of St. Bartholomew. The story behind it would require another whole presentation. Michelangelo died 18th February 1564, aged 88, Rome, the Papal States. Wanted to add just one more image, and that is one of the great pop culture salutes to Michelangelo's masterpiece. One last fitting pop culture tribute to a genius artist who also had a huge impact on our culture. The artist who painted Jim Henson and the Muppets is a fellow by the name of James Hance. The last slide will be a picture of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and I'll put it in the Google slide presentation in Google Classroom. And if you click on that slide, it'll take you to a 3D virtual reality photograph of the Sistine Chapel, so you can zoom all around and check out every piece of art in the chapel. It's really a terrific photograph. I think you'll enjoy it. Take the time and check it out. Thank you.